I've been covering the enormous rabbit hole of the homeless industrial complex here in Utah for the last 5 years in depth. I've been examining why is it the more money we pour into the homeless systems in Utah, the more homeless people we get. It's a simple question, but it's a very complicated answer as to why it happens. I'm going to be getting into that in this episode, why more money in the system produces more homeless people, not less, more, and why we are copying the systems that are in place in the major cities of California, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Sacramento, but also Portland, Seattle, Salt Lake City. We all have the same similar homeless systems in place. I'm going to be talking about why the more money we put in, the more homeless people we get out. If you haven't followed Utah Stories before, we usually do a segment on this every couple of weeks just because I'm super fascinated with it. I think all of your taxpayer dollars that go into state, federal, local funding, an enormous amount of money you are spending personally if you pay taxes, you are spending personally into the homeless industrial complex. And it is enriching people, politicians, and sort of deep state government people who we've exposed on this program, who do not want to answer our questions, who will not come on this program. We've had all sorts of incredible people on this program who have answered our questions, including Salt Lake City District Attorney Sim Gill. He was sitting in this chair next to me, answering all of our toughest questions. I commend him for that. We've had on a guy by the name of Paul Webster, who worked under Ben Carson for Housing and Urban Development for the federal government. He answered all of our toughest questions. We've had on Steve Waldrop, who's the state housing czar. He's just under the governor, trying to produce affordable housing for more Utahns. But the state homeless coordinator, one of the highest paid government officials in Utah to solve the problem of homelessness, will not answer our questions. I think, and I hope I'm proven wrong, I think we've uncovered things that make him very uncomfortable. Mainly the fact that his policies, he's been in office about, I believe, 3 to 4 years, his policies are not producing fewer homeless people, they're producing more homeless people. And everybody who's come on who's an expert in the homeless arena points out the policies are what are failing us. We need to change the policies. So welcome to Utah Stories. My name is Richard Markosian. I am the editor and publisher of this magazine, Utah Stories. We publish a monthly magazine. This is our awesome Moab adventure and fun guide along with craft beer. Meet the Kings of Craft Beer. This was a very fun issue to produce. All of our subscribers will get this delivered to their home. By now, you have it. If you're a subscriber, if you want to become a subscriber and support local journalism, it's $5 a month. Go visit utahstories.com. You can become a subscriber and get this for $5 a month. If you become a member, it's $10 a month. You get Faces of Utah magazine and Utah Stories magazines. This is quarterly, this is monthly, and you get all access behind our paywall into our investigative journalism. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to hear your questions, those of you who are joining me here on Instagram. So chime in. You got any questions, comments? I will pause and read those. I love doing this show live every Friday. We're streaming from 3 to 5 p.m. And so thanks for being here. So let's dive right in. What happened this past session in the Utah State Legislature that impacted the homeless industrial complex? I'm going to look at 2 bills that have passed. Let's first take a look at HB 329. Is that this? Where does it say? Yeah, 329 S3, sponsored by Tyler Clancy and Solutions Utah. So this bill was trying to put teeth in everything the governor said in a conference to Solutions Utah last spring, in spring of 2024. What the governor said that was so groundbreaking and remarkable back then was he was going to not only hold the homeless population and people more accountable to the services they were receiving, he wanted to hold the homeless service providers accountable for actually transforming the lives of the homeless people that they were supposed to be helping. So the biggest service provider and the person who manages and runs this giant operation is called the Road Home. Now, the Road Home, not to be confused with the facility that existed for 40 years in downtown Salt Lake City. The Road Home is an organization that manages about, I think, upwards of 20 properties, if you include all of the permanent supportive housing and the homeless shelters they manage. Those properties and those units where they have permanent supportive housing, as we have reported, the Magnolia Place apartments, we have 3 inside sources, tell us those places are absolutely full of drugs. They're full of human trafficking, drug trafficking, not according to me, but according to the people who live there and the managers who work there. We've been reporting on this for the last 2 years. The local media is silent on this. This is very suspicious to me that the local media, the Deseret News, the Salt Lake Tribune, KSL, ABC4, they don't just go in and talk to the tenants who live at Magnolia or Palmer Court or who are staying at any number of the Road Home operated facilities. The VOA also runs and manages homeless shelters. Why don't they go in, these other local news organizations, and talk to the people who live there and find out what we found out, which is they're totally full of drug trafficking and sex trafficking, especially the permanent supportive housing units. I don't know. And I find it very suspicious that the corporate media, local media, does not cover this. If you know why they don't cover it, why they won't cover it, let me know. Why they don't cover the fact that the land in downtown Salt Lake City set aside for permanent supportive housing on North Temple and Redwood Road. It was the Ramada Inn. It was owned by the Salt Lake City Redevelopment Agency. It was supposed to be for the homeless. Why that property was sold to the Larry H. Miller Development Group, and nobody really asked the question, why did they do that? Why was that allowed? And who got rich off that deal? I mean, if we could spend all of our time investigating this, probably we would find answers, but I just find it curious the local media is so uncurious about finding the answer to that. Okay, but so I digress. Let's look at HB 329, what we have in this bill. So it does a lot of things. It creates the Shelter Counties Advisory Board and makes recommendations to the Utah Homeless Services Board regarding homeless services. It requires the board to collect and report on certain data. It provides that funds to the Homeless and Housing Reform restricted account may be used for certain transportation costs to connect the individual with a support network outside of the state. So those first provisions are saying that the County Advisory Board will make recommendations to the Utah Homeless Service Board regarding homeless services. So it creates another board. Sorry, I don't think we need another board. It enacts provisions requiring certain safety requirements for homeless shelters. So homeless shelters were never, and Dale Keller, who was the Solutions Utah managing director for a while, came on this program. Unbelievably, homeless service facilities had no checks on if they were sanitary, if there were checks in how they run and operate their facilities. So this creates a system for safety requirements and penalties if service providers who receive state and federal fund refuse to comply with certain safety requirements. Mainly, they should not be allowed to be using drugs in these facilities. That's a number one. So it addresses that. That's good. As stated in this section, a pilot program means a home court pilot program established in subsection 2. This pilot program they're setting up allows a person to petition the court for an order requiring an individual participation in a pilot program. This goes on and on and on about the pilot program. I don't personally know all the details of the pilot program, but it's I think it is a means for mental health practitioners to have more access to homeless facilities so they can provide more wraparound services. I believe that's correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that it would be great because most of the people in the women's shelter that I interviewed are not in the women's shelter, or find it very difficult to be there because there are a lot of women suffering from severe mental disorders in the women's shelter. There's women who have done terrible things, according to anecdotes that I've heard and videotaped or recorded on my phone from interviews, saying that women accost other women, they commit assault all the time, they're unsafe, and these women who are undergoing psychotic breakdowns are not able to be put in another facility because there's simply no other place for them to be put. The mental institution, as Sim Gill pointed out, is absolutely full. There's no beds available. The new Huntsman mental health facility being built in South Salt Lake will alleviate some of those problems, but that is a major, major problem with the current women's shelter and men's shelter to a lesser degree. But going through this bill passed, and this bill was written in cooperation with Solutions Utah. I think they actually did a good job addressing a lot of the needs. However, I have one problem with this bill, and I'll also point out the other bill that basically it resulted in the I'll say either termination or resignation by our chief of police, Mike Brown, retired, because there are so many homeless campers in Salt Lake City. That bill was House Bill 465. The problem with both of these bills is I think the people who should serve on these boards, there's all sorts of homeless services boards, should be former homeless people, former addicts, people who have lived experience. What is the value of lived experience? What is the value of being a former homeless person or a former drug addict? Why should that person be listened to and given more credibility than a person who, say, has their doctorate in psychology from the University of Utah? I'll tell you what my opinion is. People who have lived experience understand what rock bottom not only looks like, but what it feels like and how they got off rock bottom. Like Jackie Tress, who came on this program a few weeks ago, she was absolutely homeless, absolutely strung out, headed for, I'm sure, a death by overdose, but she managed to get off rock bottom and get back on her feet, and she became an incredible success story. I want to play you a clip from that interview because it was so personally moving to me to see where she came from and to see how horrible her situation was and to see what she's turned into. It is seriously one of the most incredible success stories I've ever seen, I've ever witnessed anybody overcoming, because if you look at these headshots of her, go back to our Instagram account and look at those, the mug shots over the years, she was going down so fast, addicted to heroin and meth. And let me play for you what she has to say and what she knows from her lived experience. Tell me when we're ready, Ishal. Okay.
Homeless guy I met yesterday, in very, very, very bad shape, this guy, and just kind of get your comments on his situation and where he's at right now. So we'll take a little break, be right back.
And you said you came here originally from Price?
Yeah, from Price, Utah, about 4 years ago, 2021, to get up to, do what my probation officer wanted me to. I went to Odyssey. I did that program for almost a year and a half between inpatient and outpatient, and I had a relapse, after getting into a relationship. I spent about, 2 or 3 months out on the street, trying to figure out what I was going to do to fix it. And then I went to another program called First Step, same thing, there for about a year.
And that's housing too, right?
Yeah, sober living. That's like a halfway house, It's transitional, And I never got to the point where I had my own housing, Sober living is as far as I got. And don't get me wrong, sober living is great, but you're still technically homeless until you get your own.
What advice would you have for Brian?
To reach out to the Other Side Village, because we help the population that the Other Side Academy can't necessarily help. People that, have dual diagnosis, that are on psych meds. The best advice I would give is, don't give up and realize that there is something better out there for him. It breaks my heart to see anybody in that state of mind, because I hold it very close to my heart, and it's what fuels me to never go back to that.
But even like, why wouldn't a sober living house work for most people?
So the first thing that comes to mind for me is there's just too much freedom. I think that when we're coming straight off the street, we needed that structure. We needed, that safety of, not having electronics or a phone to reach the outside world. I needed to just focus on my behaviors. I needed to focus on myself and get myself grounded, build a foundation, and then slowly introduce those things back into my life. When you're in sober living, you have the ability to go out into the community, which increases the risk of running into people that you know from your past, being exposed to people, whether it's on tracks or on public transportation that might be using, having that temptation, maybe not having mentors and people that you can talk to about cravings and different things. I needed to be completely secluded from all of that so I could just focus on myself.
So that's Jackie Tress. She was strung out on drugs and absolutely addicted for many, many, many years. And she has that lived experience that nobody has on the Homeless Services Advisory Board. They need to fill the Homeless Services Advisory Board with Jackie Tress, with Marcy, with Brian Billmeyer, the people we've had on here from TOSA. They have an understanding of the failures of the homeless systems because they've lived it. They understand exactly why those systems are failing. And First Step House, with all due respect, it sounds wonderful, giving somebody a home who's been homeless. Odyssey House, giving somebody a recovery treatment opportunity who's been addicted to drugs and alcohol. I'm sure everybody who works there has the very, very best of intentions. I'm sure everybody who is in the administrative end of things, running those programs, designing those programs, has the very best of intentions. But why do those programs largely fail? They have a pretty dismal recovery rate, something like 17%. And Other Side Academy has about an 85% success rate. It's because the people with lived experience are running the Other Side Academy. They are the coaches there. They are the ones who understand the addict brain. I talked to Jackie about what is it really like when you are addicted to have a brain that is only telling you, first and foremost, you need drugs. And she said, you're willing to do anything for drugs. You're willing to rob your parents. You're willing to rob your friends. You're willing to break open a building and go in there and try to get money to feed that addiction. So it's like they understand the balance between compassion and services. That balance is critical. If you're just simply providing services, you might feel good at the end of the day. Look, we fed 200 homeless people. But if you don't understand the balance between compassion and services, that you got to provide an accountability to that person, you got to help them reach a rock bottom so they can have the impetus to get off and out of the situation that they're in to want to seek help, you're essentially enabling them. And so I've talked to all these people from TOSA. I encourage you to check out those previous podcasts. It's been my pleasure to talk to all these people there. And I would highly encourage, if you are a policymaker in Utah, if you are running the road home, and I'm sure they also have the best of intentions, if you're the Homeless Advisory Board chairperson, if you're Wayne Niederhauser, get on your board people who have this lived experience, because they have the solutions. When I went into this homeless project 5 years ago, I thought, you know what, I probably am going to find the best solutions to solving homelessness. No, I didn't find the best solutions. The best solutions are already out there, and they're being implemented. But what's thwarting the best solutions is there are so many inferior, with all due respect, terrible ideas that are getting way, way more funding and support than the very best solutions. So it's a reallocation of funding, it's a reallocation of priorities, and it's a rewriting of legislation to include lived experience. So that's my take on it. I'd love to hear from you if you have any comments. We got a comment from someone who's watching on the live stream. I'm just going to read this. It's called Rebirth of Slick. Oh, we had a comment from them earlier. Worked in homeless services in King County, Washington. Our social workers that went out to camps were formerly homeless. They could reach people in a way that so many other people didn't. Absolutely. I think Jackie, if every person on the streets could see where she came from, how terrible her predicament was, and how she managed to get off drugs and take on a productive role working now as a coach at the Other Side Village, that is the most inspirational thing any homeless person anywhere could see. That gentleman I met on the street, Brian, he was such a crestfallen, humble guy. I mean, he obviously looked like he was just strung out. I mean, you could tell that guy was at the point where he really needed help. Brian, if you're watching, please go see the Other Side Village, like Jackie recommended. I think that is the very best possible thing that so many people on the streets could be doing. So anyway, that's my take on it. If you want to be a bigger part of Utah Stories, check out subscription to the magazine, $5 a month. You support all of our content, the podcast. If you become a subscriber, or if you become a member for $10 a month, we also send you both magazines, Faces of Utah and Utah Stories, and you get all access to all of our content behind the paywall. And you really help us fund our investigations, especially on the homeless industrial stuff. I would love to have a budget, a bigger budget than just my time, to throw at unraveling the homeless industrial complex, to find out why these service providers, why these people at the top who don't want to come on this program are so reluctant to do so, why we don't just completely scrap the programs and policies that aren't working and trade them for much, much better programs and policies to make the whole system better. Why aren't we doing that? I honestly don't know. So if you have more insight, feel free to comment. We're going to leave this video on YouTube. That's where it's going to live. And so check us out on our YouTube channel. Of course, subscribing to our Instagram, YouTube. Our free digital newsletter is a good way to stay in this community of people who care about the most pressing issues that affect the quality of life in Utah and the voices of local Utah. That's what we're all about here at Utah Stories. And so that concludes this segment. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.